Hello participants, my dear esteemed participants at Dr. Manan Devedi. The theme that I am going to take up today happens to be that of disarmament, happens to be that of nuclear non-proliferation, and how we have to realize the all-pervading significance and all-pervading importance of the India's nuclear doctrine. When we talk about India's nuclear doctrine, then what immediately comes to our mind is the declaration, which was the kind of tiff which Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had earlier on with the American Secretary of State Dean Acheson and with the American President Truman. At that particular point of time, uh, India was in need of weaponry because Britishers had left us, our source of armaments was less, and India being a non-violent country, India being a follower of Gandhian ideals of peace, camaraderie, and Gandhian ideas of living and letting other people live, it actually could not go on to become aggressive individually. But when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru met President Truman, then he raised his objections about the American help, about the American help to Pakistan, where $15 million were given to Pakistan, and Nehru became so irritated and so irate that he blurted out in a very frustrated manner, in a manner full of angst and consternation, that we do not accept your gun, because the fact that you are telling us that Pakistan will utilize this money for its own strength is not true, because this aid and these weaponry which you are giving to the Islamic Republic of Pakistan is like a gun which can fire in both the directions, or a gun which can fire in any direction. So, right from the beginning, there was this great power created. There was this great power created security dilemma in the Indian establishment and in the Indian government, that what does India do when America has a nuclear weapon which it tried in World War II, and the People's Republic of China also went nuclear with a nuclear explosion in Lop Nor in 1967. So, why should India remain behind? And Homi Bhabha is called as the father of India's nuclear doctrine. When Homi Bhabha talks about the India's nuclear doctrine, then he went to speak such a thing in the Pugwash conference, where Homi Bhabha said that we know that there happens to be a lack of complete agreement amongst nations. There is no agreement among nations, and we are going to be a retaliatory power even if we acquire the nuclear weapons. We are never going to be the first use country. We will follow the principle of no first use, and only when we have been nuked, only when we are facing the nuclear powers, it is only then that we are going to retaliate or fire back a nuke at the other people, or at the enemy, or at the antagonist. I am using a helplessly individualistic word out of English literature. That is, we are going to need weaponry and we are not going to be the first user. If you look at the India's nuclear doctrine, then what we are going to find is that it consists of a few segments. The first segment that India's nuclear doctrine talks about happens to be that of a no first use. No first use once again means, harking back to what Homi Bhabha had said, that we are going to wait for a Paki nuke, we are going to wait for a Han or a Chinese nuke, and then only we are going to retaliate. That is, India will only respond. India will not be the aggressor country even in the face of mass annihilation, mass debilitating destruction. That happened to be the order of the day. So, this is one element which is the key strain, which is the key point as far as India's nuclear doctrine is concerned. The second element which we talked about happened to be that of a triad, that is, Indians under the advice and suggestions of Abul Kalam, our former President Abul Kalam and Brajesh Mishra and other people like Brahma Chelani, they went on to contend as part of their nuclear doctrine that there will be a triad of weaponry. There is going to be a triad of weaponry, a mutual threesome of weaponry or nukes. That is, India is going to have a sea launched nuclear option, India is going to have an air launched nuclear option, and India is also going to have an land based nuclear option if the war comes to a passe, or if a nuclear attack is finally heaved on over to India. These are the two elements of the India's nuclear doctrine which are very paramount. And another thing which we can look into is that Indian nuclear doctrine says that India is a recessed, that India will follow the idea or follow the principle of a recessed nuclear deterrence. That is, war will be there, conventional weapons might be used between India and Pakistan as one subset of a war, or between India and China as another subset of the war, but nukes are going to be a deterrence. That is, it is going to have, the Indian nuke is going to have a blackmail quality. It is going to have a quality of just messaging, and it is going to be a matter of communication that India does not want to nuke the neighbor, India does not want to nuke the enemy, and only when we are forced into a corner, or if a nuke lands up into our Albania anywhere in the country, then only we are going to retaliate. So, the idea that Indians have always latched on to is that of non-violence, the idea of being peaceful to the other countries, which are with a completely no war and no estrangement figment of imagination as being part of India's foreign policy, or as being part of India's nuclear subset. If you look into it, then the delivery vehicles are many with India. We have the BrahMos, which has been tested thrice, we have the, what do you call, we have the submarine, the nuclear power submarine. We also have planes like Sukhoi, Mirages, and other planes which are there, which can be utilized to fight a nuclear war in the case of a nuclear exchange, if it exists between India and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, between India and the People's Republic of China. One of the major debates that we all are aware of, my dear participants, you all are learned people, you all have been at important positions in the government, some of you might have been around when the Indian nuclear doctrine was formed. In that scenario, what we need to look into is that India has become a member of the nuclear supplies group, and all the achievements of such a kind go down all the level to the shoulders of late Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj and our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who made India become a part of the nuclear supplier group, that is the NSG. And nuclear supplier group is very essential, because understanding the story behind the nuclear supplier group is quite important, because when India conducted its first Pokhran nuclear explosion in 1974, immediately as a response to India's imagination, as a response to India's nuclear flight, what happened was that energy was formed in 1974, so that the twilight zone countries, as the nuclear experts call, the twilight zone countries of India, Pakistan and Israel, they do not become nuclear powers. They do not become the nuclear hospices of destruction, of war and debilitating mayhem. Another word from English literature. So the idea that happens to come to our mind is that India has made a mark in the nuclear regime also. We are also the member of the Australia group, we are also the member of the Wassenaar group, which makes us, and we have always been the members of the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty, that is FMCT. So India faced this kind of a enmity, this kind of non-cooperation, this kind of antagonism from even present day allies like United States of America, where India's image was muckracked. It was kind of demeaned by saying that India is a twilight zone country, neither here or not there. But in reality, what was happening? In reality, it was the dadagiri of the nuclear haves. The 5 nuclear haves like China, Russia, UK, Soviet Union and United States of America. These countries wanted to remain the only nuclear powers in the international system. The have-nots like India, Pakistan and Israel, they had to become the have-nots. The first ones were haves and they had to become the have-nots. This kind of a nuclear apartheid, this kind of a nuclear discrimination was heaped onto India. It was heaped onto India and India fought its way through its own protestations by not becoming part of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty CTBT in 1994 and also by not being a part of the NPT, that is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And it was this stick of non-membership, this bro-baiting by the stick of non-membership to NPT and CTBT that India was always beaten with. So the general idea that we need to talk about here is that India has struggled all the way since the last 72 odd years of its independence, that we were not made part of the club of victors. We were not made part and parcel of the nuclear parts. This is one part of it. When we talk about the nuclear issues, when we talk about disarmament, then we can look into the Atoms for Peace dictum, which was initiated by President Eisenhower. And he went on to give the idea of atoms for peace. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru too talked about it, and Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in 1988 got a resolution passed in the United Nations General Assembly, that is the UNGA. It came out with this idea of complete disarmament, but it was not mooted, it was not followed and it was not adhered to by the larger committee of nations. Case law also exists. I will cite a case, the Rainbow Warrior case, which was fought in the International Committee of Jurists or the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. There the French people had a ship and it was docked somewhere in the Asia Pacific near the New Zealand's territory, and somehow material fitted out of it. They were doing tests near French Guiana, and the entire community rallied for the support of the nuclear weapons and the experimentation which was going on at that point of time. And in a way, this path-breaking case, the Rainbow Warrior, happens to be one of the earliest instances of nuclear or disarmament related jurisprudence in the tenets and the canons of international law. Now I would like to I extend my heartfelt thankfulness to my dear past participants, to my esteemed participants for being such coveted listeners to these few words which come to me and to these nuggets of ideas which I want to disseminate to you. Thanks a lot, my dear participants, once again.